Hey there, friends and enemies, JoPaWrites here again, and with March Madness right around the corner, brackets are all the rage, and PlayStation decided to jump in with a tournament of fan favorite games. So I'm going to go through, make my selections, see which one comes out on top. Let me know where you agree or disagree. I will link their original post in the description below as well. But the games that are on this bracket are Uncharted 4, Last of Us Part 1, Death Stranding, Spider-Man Miles Morales, God of War, Gran Turismo 7, Returnal, Spider-Man 1, God of War Ragnarok, we've got Demon's Souls, Last of Us Part 2, Horizon Forbidden West, Ratchet and Clank, we got Spider-Man 2, Ghost of Tsushima, and Horizon Zero Dawn. So this is very interesting to me. I've played all of these games. I enjoy them to a varying degrees. And I know there's going to be discussion here because there's some of these games that are a little bit more controversial. Some people love them, some people don't. And jumping right in, we have Uncharted 4 and The Last of Us Part 1. I think Uncharted 4 is a very good game, but The Last of Us Part 1 is one of those titles that kind of changes the course of gaming insofar as it's led to a franchise, it's led to obviously the TV series on HBO, which is extremely well received, and I just think in general it's more impactful. These two are very close though, and I could be kind of swayed either way depending on which one you personally enjoy. Next up, we have Death Stranding versus Spider-Man Miles Morales. Against the other two Spider-Man games, I would probably pick one of them instead. Miles Morales is kind of a shorter game. It's almost like a half sequel. And for that reason, I'm going to lean Death Stranding. I know Death Stranding is a game that receives a lot of love from people. It's very artsy. But for me, it's not a game that I personally love. It's not the style that I enjoy. But I can appreciate Death Stranding for what it is, and I understand why it's beloved, even though, again, not necessarily for me. The next one is probably the easiest on the list for me. I'm not a fan of racing games personally. God of War is one of my favorite games of all time, and that's a clear-cut winner for me. I just think Gran Turismo as a series is fun, but it doesn't do anything that really blows me away. Next up, we have a very interesting one. I think Returnal is one of the more underrated games we've gotten on PlayStation in a very long time. I do enjoy what Housemarque they do as a studio as well. However, this Spider-Man game really brought back a love of superhero games in general. I think it's awesome in my opinion. The way they build out Peter Parker, the way the web swinging feels so fantastic. And I think just as a game, this one is going to edge it for me. It's very close, but for me personally, I'm a massive fan of. If you follow the channel, you know I love superhero games, Marvel in general, all that kind of good stuff, and that's why I have to lean Spider-Man in this case. But I do understand those who would pick Returnal instead for sure. Then we've got God of War Ragnarok versus Demon's Souls. This one, I'm not a massive Demon's Souls guy. I do like other games in this kind of genre, like Elden Ring and those kind of games, but it's not really my favorite. Whereas once again, God of War, that franchise, might just be a top 3 favorite of mine all time. So I'm going to pick God of War Ragnarok here. I absolutely love this game. I think anybody who hasn't played it is kind of crazy. I think this is a phenomenal title. The two games, just the storytelling that you get, the epic combat that you can have with not only Valkyries, but also some of the boss fights as well. Some of the Norse gods you have to throw down with. Just excellent all around. This is where we get to some of the more controversial titles. The Last of Us Part 2 versus Horizon Forbidden West. And this one I find fascinating because Last of Us Part 2 is very controversial. I think it's still a very good game overall. But I personally think Horizon Forbidden West is better. And it's just a stylistic idea for me. I do think the storytelling in The Last of Us Part 2 might edge it a little bit, but the combat in Forbidden West, the way they push forward the game from Zero Dawn, in my opinion, is really nice. I think just ultimately this is a game that I would much rather play, and not only play initially, but also replay. I do think The Last of Us Part 1 is better, and a lot of that is just because it is the first one, so it feels more exciting when you first play it. There's a lot more to love, in my opinion, and some of the choices obviously in part 2 are controversial. I don't buy into a lot of that, but for me personally, I think Forbidden West is the better option. Then we move on into the Ratchet and Clank versus Spider-Man 2. This one's interesting. I think Ratchet and Clank is another fun, underrated game. And people don't necessarily like Spider-Man 2. I thought it was great. The way it starts off, some of the interesting combat that you have with the various villains that you face, I think is very fun. Again, you really feel like Spider-Man. I do enjoy personally the fact that you swap between the two Spider-Man characters, which I think is very nice overall. And I think ultimately I'm just a massive fan of the Spider-Man franchise, so it's no surprise that one is going to win. This is where we get really interesting. Ghost of Tsushima versus Horizon Zero Dawn. And I think this is very close. Some people will disagree. I think people have fallen out of love a little bit with the Horizon series just because it's been so heavily pushed by PlayStation. It is one that has been heavily focused on. We got the Lego Horizon game. We are getting a Horizon MMO. I like all of that just because I think robot dinosaurs in general, like the whole story of this post-apocalyptic tale, all of that is very interesting. However, Ghost of Yotei is one of my most anticipated games because Ghost of Tsushima is tremendous, from storytelling to action to the open world is the only thing that leaves a little bit to be desired, but I don't think Horizon Zero Dawn does it better, so I'm going to go Ghost here. Moving on, and yeah, I think overall this is a fairly clear cut for me, even though I think both games are very good. And the nice thing about this list that I'm finding is that I've enjoyed pretty much every one of these games for what they are. Now, we move on to the next round where we have The Last of Us Part 1 versus Death Stranding. I'm going to move on to The Last of Us Part 1. Like I mentioned with Death Stranding, not my favorite game. I'm looking forward to the sequel to see what they have in store for us. Maybe they surprise us with some of the changes. I think they'll probably stay true to what worked well in the original, and it's just not a game that's for me. Whereas again, Last of Us Part 1 is one of those titles. I even really enjoyed the multiplayer of The Last of Us. So I feel like it's one of those games that I just really enjoyed throughout, and it's definitely left a mark on me, more so than Death Stranding personally. Now, God of War versus Spider-Man 1 is fascinating for me personally. I loved both of these games. They're two of my favorites in recent memory, especially within their genres. They're both action-oriented games with fun stories and games that I have gone back to and really enjoyed when I could. Now, ultimately, I think I'm going to have to move God of War forward, and the reason for that is it's just a little bit more memorable for me. Spider-Man was fun. Spider-Man was enjoyable. But at the end of the day, I think God of War just stands out more as a franchise for me personally. Even though I understand this one, I can understand it going the other way as well. And I just love God of War and that franchise. So this is where, again, we continue to get like interesting with some of these combinations. We got God of War Ragnarok versus Horizon Forbidden West. I'm going to lean towards Ragnarok here. And again, I am a simp for the God of War franchise. It is one of my favorites. We may have an all God of War finale, but maybe not. We'll have to wait and see. However, I do think compared to Forbidden West, it just is a bit better for what I'm personally looking for. I really enjoy the combat upgrades that we got with this game. I really enjoy the exploration, the uncovering of the story with Atreus and all of that. I think it's just so well done that I would pick that game pretty much every time. And Forbidden West, again, enjoyed the game, but it just didn't leave the mark just the same as God of War Ragnarok, in my opinion. Now, this one is Not actually that close. I think Spider-Man 2 is a very good game. Like I said, I absolutely loved it. Ghost of Tsushima, again, is one of those games that just has built a foundation. It's made itself into a franchise with how good the game was. And so that is hard to do in today's day and age, not just relying on fan favorite characters like Spider-Man, like Venom, like all of that. Because of that, I think Ghost of Tsushima as a game is the winner here. I can see why people might choose Spider-Man 2. For me personally, I think Spider-Man 1 got unlucky because I might choose Spider-Man 1 over Ghosts here. But for Spider-Man 2, probably going to lose. I don't know. It's a close call. All these games provide something different, so that's where it really makes it a little bit difficult for me to make that selection. And we're down to the final 4. And this may seem pretty clear-cut based on what I've said so far. You think that God of War is going to get the clean sweep, but that might not necessarily be the case, as I am choosing God of War over The Last of Us Part 1. I think The Last of Us Part 1 might be more impactful for gaming as a whole, but for me personally, God of War, the original 2018, is better. I enjoy it more. I think it's one of those games that I absolutely love. I 100% completed it because of how much I enjoyed myself, and it's a game that I will remember fondly for a long time. When it first came out, it was absolutely mind-blowing. On the other side, we've got Ragnarok versus Ghost, and I loved God of War Ragnarok, to be honest. I think it's, like I said, one of those games that I will play again. I love it. It's fantastic. But I started replaying Ghost of Tsushima because of the announcement of Ghost of Yotai, and I just realized how beautiful the game is, how well done it is. Everything is just, like, you're able to approach combat in different ways. You're able to really push the story forward in ways that I was not expecting. So for me, I think I'm going to lean towards Ghost of Tsushima. And there we have our finals, God of War versus Ghost of Tsushima. Again, this is just exactly what I'm looking for with PlayStation games. You've got action, you've got interesting single player story, you've got games with protagonists that are awesome in my opinion, and just in general they're completely different insofar as the story, the setting, the realism even with them. But overall, this is what I want when I'm talking about first party PlayStation exclusive titles that I think are phenomenal. I think they should also drop day one on PC, to be honest. That's another controversial opinion of mine. But overall, I'm going to have to go with God of War. This is, again, one of my favorites of all time. It is a very close case. It is one of those where, again, could go either way. I understand if Ghost is your preference, and I understand if you would have picked that to go all the way. There's some other titles on here I can see being number one instead, but this is my list. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Like the video as always, comment, subscribe. My name is Jopa. Have a good one, and I'll catch you all later.